Well, we watched a lot this past year as European economies struggled and still struggling to get their debt problems under control. But in 2011, we could be looking more at ourselves, as many analysts warn that California's debt issuance could blow up next year. Liz Claman is digging deeper into California's spending problems right now in L.A. Liz.
There are huge issues, obviously, Chris, not to mention the $25 billion budget deficit, which is massive. I mean, that's crazy. That's more than the GDP of most smaller nations. So obviously, this is a huge issue. And then last Monday, I'm opening up the Los Angeles Times, and there was an op-ed written by the state treasurer, Bill Lockyer. And the title really caught my eye, and it said, "California isn't broken." He criticized a recent Wall Street Journal op-ed in which the author called California the Lindsay Lohan of states. Of course, you've heard Stuart Varney talk a lot about that, and said, quote, "The criticism is long on inflammatory rhetoric, but it lacks any evidentiary foundation." And Bill Lockyer then went ahead and started to, tick down the whole list, saying we're not in that bad a situation, with an unemployment rate, though, that has nearly doubled since Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger took office, and a budget deficit that has more than doubled since he took office. Here's the question. Economists who are still worried, what more do they have to worry about? Could we see muni bond defaults? That's a big topic of conversation lately. Governor Schwarzenegger didn't do much for jobs. In fact, as you saw with that rate, we started at 6.7% when he became the governor. Now it is at plus 12% for the unemployment rate. So jobs and economic growth, what about that? We bring in special advisor to Governor Schwarzenegger for that particular issue, David Crane, joining us live now from San Francisco. And David, a lot of people have been outlining the bad and the ugly, no good at all. Bill Lockyer comes out and says there is some good about California. You've just come off really trying to help Governor Schwarzenegger. And frankly, don't get mad at me for saying this, but as a Californian, doesn't still look good. Is there something around the corner? Am I missing something here?
Yeah, I think you're missing something. As a Californian myself, and with a wife and two children who are Californians, I'm obviously very focused on what's good for the state long term. I think people often confuse state government finances with the state's economy. So, for example, the state's economy was the 22nd best performer of state economies last year. And yet the state budget is a serious mess. They're two very different things. So let me just talk about the economy for 1 second. It's a $1.9 trillion economy, and it's the most diverse economy in the country. And we have a very high unemployment rate, as you pointed out, largely as a consequence of the collapse of the housing sector. The way I measure unemployment in California is as a percentage of national unemployment. And right now we're about 125% of the national unemployment rate, which is better, frankly, than the last Great Recession. In the 1990s, the state's unemployment rate hit 150% of the national rate. Neither one of them is good. But I can tell you that when it comes to moving the state economy and making policy changes that will improve the economic environment in California, what matters are things like Governor Schwarzenegger's corporate tax reform that he did last year, which reduces corporate taxes in California and reduces costs for employers in the state. I think that will make a difference long-term for California's economy. And then getting state finances in order will make a difference in California's economy by reducing costs for employers and employees, which is one of the reasons we focus so much attention on things like pension reform in California and budget reform in California. We got some things done, and we got open primary done in California, which will elect good people who will make big changes in California and improve the economy. But there's always a lag period.
We can only hope. We can only hope. But let's talk about the fact that you outlined about the corporate tax rate, which are right around now 8.84%. Talking about making it a more business-friendly climate, there was a response. There were many responses to Bill Lockyer's op-ed piece, and one of them, a guy named Donald in Phoenix, wrote, and we pulled this one out because it really caught our eye. "As an employer operating in 12 Southwest states, I experienced firsthand the cost of doing business in California. The employee and facility expenses are the highest of any state in which we have employees. As a result, my employee headcount is half of what it was before 2008. What do we do? Because it's all about private sector job growth. And in the end, we're a business channel, and we know that that is really what people need to see more of. How do you really harness that?
Yeah, well, you are right. And it's all about private sector employment. I mean, in California, we have 16 million private sector employees. And that's where our focus is, which is one of the reasons we had battles with the public sector employees who constantly want to take more money effectively from the private sector employment and employees. You know, it depends on the nature of the business. You know, California is very diverse. So a business, for example, in Silicon Valley could not flourish in that gentleman's economy in Phoenix because labor costs would be too high. They can't get the labor down there that they need. On the other hand, some industries can do better in other states where there's lower costs, which is one of the reasons we focus so much attention on reducing costs, like workers' compensation, like corporate taxes, et cetera. But the job isn't done. We still have excessively high regulatory costs in California, and we have the ever-present risk in California of an employment tax increase. That's one of the reasons we wanted budget reform in California and pension reform, because you want to take the pressure off of future tax increases.
Yet you've got Silicon Valley. Let's take it up north to where you are. And Silicon Valley, of course, still is that engine of unbelievable growth of ideas. And, of course, what comes with that are jobs. And you've got the Googles of the world, the Facebooks, Electronic Arts, Intel, Pandora, the smaller companies, Citrix. All of these companies have said, you know what, we are here. Yahoo laying off people, though. How do you look toward that and say, I want to leverage that strength of the tech sector and make sure that in Austin, Texas, or frankly in New York City, which is trying to lure high-tech business, that they don't steal it from us like the movie business has been stolen from Los Angeles and taken to places like Toronto?
Well, the policymaker tools, when you have a $1.9 trillion economy, are things like corporate tax rates, regulatory reform, infrastructure, and education. And that's what really moves the needle. You know, you have 16 million employees in California, so it's not like you pick and choose and say, let me help this company here or let me help that company there. You want to create an environment in which wealth creators allocate capital. And the reason that they're willing to do it in California is because we have great education at the higher levels, at higher education levels, which is why we focus so much on higher education in California. Infrastructure. You can't generate wealth unless you can move people and goods, which is why the governor focused so much attention on infrastructure and lowering costs like corporate tax costs and other regulatory costs. That's what California has to stay focused on.
We're not going to solve this problem in 30 seconds, but when we look at what stimulus money and state money is being spent on, we pulled some of it out, looking at two issues, for example, $54 million to protect wine passenger train station rails areas. I mean, then you look at the one piece that had, okay, $233,000. It's not the biggest amount of money, but doing a study on why Africans vote, and while that actually did create a dozen or so jobs, 7 of those jobs were in Africa. This has got to stop in the state of California if we're going to get ourselves back on our feet and remain one of the best states, one of the best areas on the planet. Is that not true?
Yes, but I think you're talking about something that was a nationwide phenomenon, not a California phenomenon. You're talking about the federal stimulus package, a lot of which the expenditures went to things that were not job producing. And I'm not one of the people who thinks that a federal stimulus plan is the end all to creating jobs in this country. The end all is great infrastructure, low costs on employers, low taxes, and great education. That's what governments need to devote attention to.
And that, of course, in the form of what John F. Kennedy did, which was lower taxes, but also do infrastructure. David, good to see you. Thank you so much. And we'll see what you morph into in the new year. Keep us posted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.